Hello, and thank you for joining us for today's discussion, which examines whether we have reached the end of jobs for life, and specifically what this means in terms of rethinking careers in the age of employability. I'm delighted to be joined by Robin Lewis, Executive Coach for this session. Robin, thanks for coming on.
Delighted to be with you, Aaron. Good to talk, as always.
It's always a pleasure. It's always a pleasure. Thank you, Robin. I'd like to start by referring to a recent article which featured in the Financial Times last week and highlighted the European Central Bank's 358 career model. Essentially, what this means is that after 3 years, the bank would expect you to build expertise in a new role, by year five to start planning your next move, and by year eight to ideally transition into a new position. So, whilst this is nothing new or radical, it does suggest that an organization which is known for traditional working patterns and workforce stability are trying to adapt to the modern age. Of course, this carries consequences ranging from employment security to employability. Robin, I'd love to get your thoughts on this development and how you see this.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. I thought it was an absolutely fascinating article for a number of reasons, and sort of digging into it in a little bit of detail. So, the European Central Bank, clearly there are some really specific issues and challenges that they've got. So, I understand, for example, that they've got really low turnover amongst their senior staff. So, clearly, what they're trying to do here is to encourage a little bit of momentum and movement and generate some of that forward thinking approach that you get from possibly from more dynamic organizations where people are sort of flowing through roles and flowing through different sort of functions much faster.
Mm,
So I think that they're out to try to do something really specific. It's quite for the ECB. This is really quite innovative. Let's not lose sight of this. This is an
yes.
organisation where typically highly experienced, really skilled professionals will work for a long time, many of them right the way through to retirement. So injecting a little bit of dynamic talent planning in there, actually, it's a great thought. It's a great thing to do, and it's quite an innovative new policy approach. So I'm really pleased that it
I think
caught
so.
the media attention. But I would say, to your point, actually, it's not new. This concept of dynamic succession planning, talent management, moving people through organizations is clearly not new. It's been around for a long time. The concept of employability has been around for a long time. So it feels like the ECB, to a certain extent, is playing catch up um, with something that's actually been a growing trend organizationally, actually for many years.
And I suppose, in terms of what they're signaling with this move, is the sense that there is an element of playing catch up and getting with the program, if I could use it that way. And do you feel that it grabbed headlines for those reasons, despite it not being a truly revolutionary concept? Was it maybe a surprise to see an organization regarded as very stable and secure as
Yeah.
having kind of moved in that direction?
Well, I think there's two things going on here. One is absolutely that it's in a way highlighting the organisation and it sort of resonates with a number of sort of international organizations, particularly sort of governmental type, international governmental type organizations, where the fabric is one of stability and security, and sort of rightly so because of the nature of the roles, particularly some of the sort of the larger financial institutions, where security and stability is absolutely paramount and built into the culture. So it highlights that sort of radical people thinking and people strategy, which is being injected to a certain extent into those organizations to really help sort of bring that sort of dynamic thinking further forward. But I
Absolutely.
think if we look at it in a broader context across the world of work generally, we're in a very challenging employment market at the moment, and employability has been a concept that's helped sort of really drive careers and help really build that sense of momentum uh, in a world where we've clearly moved on. The majority of corporate organizations moved on a long time ago from the concept of jobs for life.
Absolutely. And there are a number of legacy cultures and stability myths that this idea does challenge. As you say, the world's moved on. It's not quite the world of 9 to 5 wood panel boardrooms anymore, maybe in certain pockets, but the picture has shifted quite considerably. So I suppose, in conclusion on that, do you feel this is a symbolic step towards normalizing structured reinvention? Essentially, are they somehow taking a well overdue lead on this action?
Well, I think they're taking a lead, but I suspect also that it's very much around having the right skills and making sure that those skills are relevant for the future of the work that they're doing. And clearly, as a leading financial institution, they need to be absolutely at the top of their game.
Yes.
So to be able to make sure that people are rotating through, keeping skills fresh, keeping new ideas coming through, being at the forefront of innovation. And let's not lose sight of the fact that the world of work is changing so massively from a technological perspective. And you've got to be absolutely thinking about game-changing ideas. What's next? Where's the business going? How are we approaching things? So it's not about the skills that you enter the workforce with or the workplace with necessarily going to be the skills that are relevant at the various different stages in your career. So if you're looking at that from a broader strategic talent planning or succession perspective, it's really important to keep some sense of dynamic movement, keep people moving through new ideas, new skills, refreshed thinking, new ways of doing things. So,
Mm-hmm.
to that extent, I think if you can encourage movement, and I suspect again, in reading up on the sort of ECB and their approach, that's exactly what they want to do. Clearly, they want performance, and as we all do in organisations. So, ideally, if you get an executive into the role, they're going to take some time to really settle in before they're performing at the top of their game.
Yes.
And if that's going to take 2-3 years to really be in that position of peak performance, you then want a period of stability. Typically, in sort of the leadership world, we're talking about a cycle of 3, 4, 5 years where you get into the role, then you're able to really inject performance, lead change, make things happen, do all those good things that you are hired to do. But actually, towards the end of that cycle, then the organization is typically starting to look at, well, what's next? Who are the successors?
The succession plan.
And if that's done within a 3 to 5 year time plan, on average, that's probably the sort of the routine that the larger corporates are looking at, maybe even faster.
Absolutely. Well, they have said it's not specifically a mandate, but it tends to set very clear expectations around continuous development. As you say, it enables internal mobility, skill building in an era of AI, data
Yeah,
disruption, and of course, an evolving job market. I think the interesting extension to this was that they've created an internal LinkedIn style platform.
yeah,
And the concept behind that is to enable staff to post CVs, explore new roles.
yeah.
I think there is a move to support some secondments to other financial services
Yeah, and I thought that
institutions
that
as
was
well.
very interesting, Aaron, too. The concept of secondments, moving to other financial institutions, but still having the security of understanding that you can come back to your job or come back to the ECB. So movement, but within a really stable framework. So what a great opportunity to really push the boundaries a little bit.
I think so. I think so. And it can be the case that larger organizations such as the ECB do take a little bit longer to adapt and to change and embrace,
Yeah.
evolution, but they seem to be going about it in a refreshingly, positive way. So I think it's a great concept overall. If we were to zoom out a little bit from that, we know about, of course, the concept of the 4Rs, proactive talent strategy.
Yeah.
So they are, of course, to reskill, to redesign, to recruit, and to retain.
Hmm.
Could you perhaps elaborate a little bit on your view of the 4Rs and
Four
particularly how
R's.
are
Yes.
organizations enabling ongoing
Yes.
capability growth?
Yeah, and of course this comes from some thinking that's sort of led by Josh Bursin, and clearly others have elaborated and built around this. But if we're looking at people strategy, talent planning, succession planning in its most dynamic form, then I think it's really important that organizations look at it from multiple different perspectives. So clearly we've got this example now that we're talking about in the ECB, which is about stability, but momentum within a stable environment. But if we look at the range of organizations that operate across our different sort of sectors, from highly entrepreneurial startups through to scale ups through to more mature organizations, or whichever sector we're in, whether this is financial services or healthcare or insurance, or across the range of different businesses that we typically work with, then what are the challenges that we're looking at from a people strategy perspective? Now, it is important to align talent planning with business strategy. What stage is the business going through? Is it looking to reinvent itself to take advantage of artificial intelligence and build those game-changing skills for the future? Or actually, is it much more about sort of maturity and stability? And of course, there are many variants on business planning and business strategy. But the point I think we need to get to is that the talent planning approach should reflect the priority, the mission, the strategy, the particular sort of industry segment that the business is in and what's relevant for that. So if that means bringing in new skills, going into the marketplace to find those skills, or building and growing them internally, or indeed, bringing in external partners through consultancy type relationships, or the range of interventions that we've got when we're looking at a talent sort of canvas across the strategic map. There's numerous different interventions that we've got. The important thing here is to have a mix so that you de-risk them. And that typically in an organization, you're looking at how do you retain your best people, retain top talent. But equally, if you're looking at it from a performance point of view, how do you start to train and develop and upskill those people who have got a lot more potential, but they're just not delivering it at the moment?
Yes.
And then, of course, potentially there are people who are not the right fit for the organization. So there may be a little bit of a challenge and change. So keeping it dynamic, keeping people moving, always looking at sort of where the organization is going. Where do we want to be in 2 to 3 years' time? What are the skills that we need? I'm having some great conversations at the moment about sort of where artificial intelligence is taking organizations, and what are the leadership skills that we're going to need to really accelerate and power that move. Well, actually, some of those skills are rather difficult to predict, because actually, the actual technology advances at such a fast pace.
Absolutely.
But then if you take the sort of flexibility, the learning agility, so the mindset of a leader, that's something which, to be able to adapt and change, lead that change, is critically important. So, without going down all of those specific areas, if we're looking at from, you asked the question about those 4 Rs. If I'm building a talent strategy, I'm looking at it from all of those different perspectives. How do we recruit the right talent? How do we retain the right talent? How do we redesign the organization and the jobs to make sure that we're actually taking advantage of the skills, the capabilities that we've got, and optimizing the opportunities within that sort of talent mix? And how do we give people the opportunity to really learn, reskill, upskill, sort of build their capability for the future to really accelerate that pace of change? So I think it's a sort of holistic. It's a great framework.
Yes.
But it's a pretty good sort of holistic approach to managing.
It is, and you can almost choose the right segments and adapt them accordingly to fit the mission, the
Yeah,
culture, the intent. I think you raise an interesting point on talent retention there as well. It's always been the case with FANG companies and the Silicon Valley
yeah,
rocket ships, if you like, that have actively encouraged people. If they're staying too long in one place, they're actively pushed on to keep learning, progressing to the point where it's unthinkably the case that the manager may say, I think you're doing too well. You need to go to another company and learn this skill or have that experience. So, in this concept of retaining staff, what do you feel makes high performers stay when mobility is encouraged? And how do you get the balance?
Well, I think the companies that do this best have a fantastic employee proposition that really aligns with their culture. And think of some of the technology companies that are out there, or indeed, think about some of the mission-led organisations, particularly in sort of healthcare, biotech, pharma, or businesses that are at the forefront of innovation, health tech, financial technology, fintech. There's some great examples of businesses that have aligned their culture, align their employee value proposition with the strategic mission of the business. When that's aligned, then I think they typically are better placed to attract the right talent to really drive that business forward. And then if their internal machinery around how they work, the culture, the employee life cycle, often referred to as the employee value proposition, how we do things around here, how you engage people, how you involve people. If all that's right, then you're going to be better placed to not just attract, but to retain the talent that you need to win in the market. For sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think so as well. I think back on the recruitment piece as well. There is now in the current climate, unfortunately in the tech sector, quite a number of layoffs occurring, and
Yeah.
that's driven by various factors. But historically, there's been the discussion about when should we go external and look to bring in new talent and
Yeah.
dilute the gene pool, all the rest of it, versus promoting within, nurturing existing talent. We've just talked about the potential people have to be promoted and trained. Is there still a healthy balance to be struck in that regard? And if so, does it relate back to the culture and the EVP of an organization when they determine, do we go external,
Yeah,
do we
I
promote
did.
within?
And what I do find, again, talking to a number of organizations, that there's sometimes a bit of a gap here. There's the strategic rhetoric about, yes, we want to promote from within. We've got our internal talent pool. We've got our internal talent market. And sometimes that can be quite mature in the way that it operates. Sometimes it can be quite informal and quite sort of relaxed. But there's an intent to promote from within, to accelerate careers and opportunities. That's a great strategic intent. And then the reality in organizations is often quite different.
Yes.
And the reality is, actually, I'm a line manager. I've got a vacancy. I need to fill it quickly. I don't necessarily want to go through a laborious internal process that can take
Hmm.
many months. Um,
Hmm.
and actually, I know somebody who's great for the role, or I know a great recruitment agent who I can bring in, or
Yes.
headhunter who I want to work with, or that's a rather sort of prosaic way of talking about it. But the fact is that sometimes it's easier to go hire externally
Yes.
than to go through an if it's an overly bureaucratic process. Businesses that do this well have a different approach. The primary driver here is to have the right person in the role, the right skills for the role. And of course, there's an internal cultural dynamic to that too. If you're promoting and developing from within, that's a terrific approach. But equally, if you've got a healthy balance of, actually, we do need to be bringing in those skills from the competition, from the marketplace, from technology and innovation and sort of future thinking skills, then actually there does need to be that balance. So there are occasions where, if you're looking at a succession map or a talent planning map, you should absolutely be determining the roles that are going to be ring fenced for internal promotion, but equally
Yes.
having a fair proportion that you go to market and bring in those challenger skills. And again, without being too prescriptive, it's having that healthy mix.
Yes, I don't think there's a one size that fits all scenarios. You have to be adaptable there. So, looking at the concept of employability, as we talked about earlier, versus employment security, in your view, Robin, what does it now mean to be employable as a senior executive?
So I think it's particularly pertinent in today's executive jobs market, because there's no doubt that firms globally are restructuring. They're looking at their costs. They're laying people off, and there's all sorts of reasons behind that. If we map that against the fact that the concept of jobs for life has, well, that's not the case anymore, is it? So people typically move through jobs many times in their career. The concept of employability is about thinking about your professional identity in a broader and more strategic sense than the job that you're in. So you're a finance professional, you're a global banking professional, you're a healthcare expert, you're a human resources expert, you're a technology professional, and of course you then break it down to a more specific. This is what I do. This is how I help organizations grow. As a leader, this is my style of working. So there are multiple ways of sort of describing this, but the point being, don't align yourself 100% with the role that you're doing. Think about your career in a bigger picture, more strategic sense. This is what I contribute to society. This is what I contribute to the employment marketplace. And as a leader, this is how I make things happen. This is my
Yes,
point of difference. Right.
absolutely.
Then the next level of thinking about it is, what skills have I got that are relevant? And actually, how have I made things happen and accelerated change and delivered solutions or products in the past? So what have been my core achievements? Well, then we're looking to the future. What are businesses really looking for? What are the skills that are needed? And actually, how can I be relevant to the future? So the question no longer becomes, or is not so focused on, actually, my next job is a project manager, or my next job is going to be a VP at a certain bank. Actually, it's what do I bring to the world of work? That might sound
Yeah,
quite conceptual. That's a way of looking at it. In reality, what this really means is you need to keep your skills up to date, ahead of the market, and relevant.
absolutely. It's almost got to be anticipatory.
Anticipating, absolutely. And think about jobs as broader than the company that you're working in. So let's take the concept of networking and how that is used in a really powerful sense to effectively find another opportunity and to build your profile in the market. And as you know, working in the executive coaching space, this is something that we talk a lot about, you know, the power of networking. Typically, if you're in a job in a company for a long time, you know, I have numerous conversations with executives who say, look, I just don't network. I know a lot of people in my business, but I don't get out and about. Well, then suddenly you find that you're between jobs or thinking about your next move. Well, what do I do? How do I suddenly build that network? So those that are more, in a way, adept at really using this concept of employability and keeping that at the forefront of their minds would take something like keeping their network going and refreshed and building it, building those new connections all the way through their career, all the way through. It's no longer I'm looking for a job, I need to build my network. It's actually,
You have
this
to be
is
doing
my
it
professional
proactively.
identity. This is what I do.
Mm. And it's almost akin to a muscle, isn't it? Building the muscle, you have to keep doing it repeatedly,
Yeah,
almost as a as a regular exercise to maintain those relationships. Because
yeah,
quite often the reality is that most jobs that people secure through networking are hidden jobs. They're not advertised. They're not in the
yeah.
public domain.
Accessing the hidden jobs market, that takes us into a whole new new sort of space, of
A
course.
new rabbit hole in a
Yeah,
sense.
absolutely.
But you're
But I would
absolutely
say,
right.
and just you know, as a last word on this concept of employability. So I had a mentor quite early in my career who said that he had always, senior guy in the industry that we were working in, he'd always thought of careers in 5 year blocks and was thinking in terms of moving leadership roles at least once every 5 years. And within that 5 year block, 18 months as the maximum that you're focusing on a particular project. Now, this is, you know, without giving away too much from an age point of view, this is quite a few years ago. So that concept of employability has been around for a long time. But that's
Yeah,
always
and
stayed
that
with me,
being
that sort of 5 year roadmap.
Yeah, and there have been some evolutionary changes, but I still
Yeah,
think there's quite a strong rationale behind that. Every 5 years, that's not a bad cadence with which to plan
I
the
think so.
next move.
I think so.
Keeps you fresh, keeps you developing. And I think going back to the employability piece, you talk quite a lot about definition there, and that bleeds into things like leadership signature. What's your unique value proposition? And quite often, when I'm speaking to executives, I'm asking them questions like, when leaders hire you, what problems are they actually trying to solve? And
Yeah,
of all your career achievements, which one perhaps best aligns with how you want to be perceived today? How would you be described in 3 words professionally by colleagues or people that reported to you? So I think building up that profile is a necessary process to go through. It does
yeah,
start very conceptually, but the end result, generally speaking, is something that gives you a very clear narrative around
yes,
here's what I bring to the table. That leads neatly, if you like, onto another keyword that's very, very salient at the moment, which is resilience. So we talk quite a lot about the need for resilience and almost building that up as a memory muscle as well. What do you think resistance looks like in a volatile labor market such as the one we're in right now?
resilience. So yes, I think resilience is hugely important from an executive perspective, both within organizations and between organizations. So let's look at it first of all within the organizational context. Most of the coaching conversations I'm having with leaders and with executives in global organizations, we're talking about change. We're talking about radical change, organizational change, downsizing, reskilling, introducing new technology. However you look at it, the organizations that we're working with are facing disruptive change. So the personal impact of that, whether it's to do with role anxiety or personal confidence in leading change, a variety of different sort of issues that present from a leadership point of view. Resilience is a key capability, personal capability for dealing with that level of disruption. And then if we look at it from a sort of external perspective between jobs and you know, you and I are both talking to a number of executives who are looking at either considering transitioning or looking at their next role. That takes time, particularly at the more senior levels. It takes time, and so there's clearly concerns that build up, and there's a sense of urgency, and in some cases that leads to the need to really consider resilience as a sort of core, in a way, emotional capability to be able to really cope with that level of challenge. And what does it actually mean? And everybody's going to have their own sort of definition around this. There are very practical things around resilience, which is being prepared for that level of change and disruption and having the personal strategies to learn to flex, to build new ways of doing things, and to sort of hear new opinions and take new ideas on board. So I think there's a lot of that, but equally, then if you look at it from a personal wellness point of view as well, I mean, I do want to just focus on this for a minute, because I think we can spend a lot of time thinking about how well we're doing as leaders or organizational people, or what we're doing, how we're delivering a particular task or delivering a set of objectives. But how much time do we spend on ourselves, actually reflecting on how well are we doing? How are we looking after ourselves? Are we giving ourselves the time, pay attention to actually how we're feeling?
Mm.
Um, so I think if we're looking at this from a resilience point of view, I'm always going to be encouraging people to take time to reflect on themselves as well as their job and their task. And then, of course, the other thing to highlight here is it's not just about you, is it? It's about the sort of system, or the people that are close to us,
Mm.
whether that's the colleagues that you're working with in your team or at work, whether it's your family, your partner, your friends, actually who you are and
Support
how you
network,
operate. It's
in a sense.
profoundly impacting, and this is your support network. So
Mm.
share, talk about how you're feeling.
Absolutely. And I think in the past, it has reduced quite considerably, but there used to be a very, I don't think macho is the right word, but there was a sense that showing personal weakness or sharing feelings was seen as a weakness somehow. And I do think that persists in certain circles. From my perspective, it's
Yeah,
absolutely not the case. I think it's completely necessary to do that. It's part of the
yeah.
self-care piece, which we just touched upon.
I think that's a great point. And if I look at that through a sort of coaching perspective, and the way coaching coaching, however you look at it, how it's changed and developed over the last couple of decades. And in a way, in the business world, coaching, when I first started getting involved with it 20 years or so ago, was often seen as a remedial strategy. Somebody isn't performing, let's get them a coach. A little bit of anxiety about that, actually. What am I doing wrong? Why do I need a coach?
Yes,
I'm generalizing, but there was a bit of a perception,
sort of some kind of a stigma attached to it.
stigma attached. But I think now coach working with a coach is seen as a really positive contribution to personal development, management development, both on a sort of individual level and on an organizational level. And
And
I
I,
think the ability to have these confidential, safe place conversations to talk about the personal and the leadership challenges, as well as the sort of operational challenges of daily life in organizations, it's very powerful.
it is, and it leads to another interesting point. That the most forward-looking organizations are trying to foster self-renewing leadership. So they're trying to encourage their leaders to not only look at personal development and where they can improve and learn and continue to be at the forefront, but also to spread that message to their staff as well. So
Yes.
it's kind of an interesting idea and still something that's relatively radical and under practiced. But I suspect that may become more of a feature over the next 5 to 10 years in executive circles, certainly the generation coming through
I
to
think
C
so.
suite.
I think so because I think ultimately what we're trying to do here is to encourage organisations to really find a way to deliver their potential
Hmm.
strategically. Their potential. They can only do that if the individuals working, the leadership, and then throughout the organisation. And this is true for if you're just a team of a couple of people, or if you're a large global corporate. If the talent within that organisation is feeling great about what they're doing and how they're doing it, performing at their best, delivering to their potential. So I think everything that we've talked about, from that sort of overall systemic approach to talent strategy, succession planning, dynamic sort of movement of people through the organization, through to the more tactical stuff about sort of recruiting, retaining, reskilling, and then the more sort of emotional connectivity and supportive approach that you get through coaching and that sort of orientation. It all makes absolute sense and
It
helps
does.
empower that sort of sense of personal potential.
And it's going back to what you said, it's that holistic approach that's necessary sometimes to
Yeah.
select the right elements and assemble the pieces of the jigsaw. So I think there is a lot for our listeners to reflect on here. Something else I wanted to touch upon was the concept of reinvention mid-role and also returners. We talked about how senior leaders can reinvent themselves without necessarily having to change jobs, or people that are coming back into the corporate world from maybe an entrepreneurial journey or a startup journey or a career break after a personal situation, and how do they rebuild confidence? So what do you feel are the right approaches here? Do you think secondments, perhaps skill refreshers, or sabbaticals, which become necessary from time to time?
Yes.
How do you see it?
Yes, I think it can be a variety of different things, and this sort of concept of reinvention is really prevalent at the moment, isn't it? And we see this across the sort of leadership and executive world, particularly as the needs of organisations change so radically and so fast. I would go back to the conversation we had slightly earlier. About what's your point of difference? What is it about you that really excites you as an individual that you can take to market, and why is that relevant? And
Yes.
actually, again, I'd say that don't focus too much on the job or the job title, but actually what excites you, what makes you really passionate about the difference you make in the organizations you work with or the people that you support. So it becomes a little bit more values based as well as skills based. But if you get that mix, so it works for you as a person and it's in tune with your values,
Yes.
it works economically for the business. So you find the right niche. We know where these businesses are going. We know what keeps the chief executives awake at night. And that's that sounds like a trite question, but actually, what's the business problem that you can solve? And if you can bring those two trains of thought together, then you can create a unique proposition that will resonate and help you reinvent, reinvigorate, reignite all of those things that you kind of asked.
I think you're absolutely right, and it's also a case of perhaps looking at what's one recurring challenge that I've solved in multiple roles or multiple departments, across a number of companies or industries. Is there a special skill that I have or a secret sauce? So I
Yeah.
often talk to people about their unique philosophy and what's the most contrarian view that you hold about leadership or
Yeah.
strategy or transformation, and through distilling all that information and perhaps introducing a concept of psychometric testing, maybe the game changing index,
Yes.
people can assemble those bits of information and get more clarity somehow. So there are
Yes,
different
well, I
methods.
mean, I think you touch on a great point there, but actually having that sort of repertoire of information at your fingertips that you can talk to about who you are, what you do, what your point of difference is, your style of leadership. I talk about the leadership signature, as you know, as being that sort of core concept that sort of articulates that, your point of difference. But then when I look at profiles, for instance, on LinkedIn, too many of them are, well written and nicely rehearsed, but they don't tell me very much about the individual. So,
No.
so what I'm trying to encourage people to do in that sense is to really stand out from the crowd. What really makes you different? Why should I have a conversation with you? And then to its next level, why should I hire you? What can you bring to my business? And I think the leaders that do this well, professionals that do this well, they see where the market's going. They see those gaps. They understand the problem. So, I mean, artificial intelligence is the classic example here, isn't it? Revolutionizing the way
Yes.
that we do business. You've got to be ahead of the game. You've got to be able to talk that language and understand what that means for the potential roles and the opportunities that might come your way, and then ensure that you've got the skills, not necessarily the deep technical skills in all senses, but the understanding of how you can then
How to
deploy.
utilize it, what impact it makes, what's the future
Absolutely.
potential? Yeah,
Yeah.
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 It's so important to be up to stay at the bleeding edge, stay ahead.
The leading edge. But I think the core question behind that is what's the gap in the market? What's the problem that I can solve? Think about it a little bit like a consultant going into the business, being asked to do a piece of strategic work, analysis. What's the issue? What's the problem? Um, and actually, how can I help you? How can I solve? Where do we want to be 3 years'
Yes.
time? And actually, what are the various milestones we need to achieve to get there?
That's right. And whether it's a consultant or a coach coming in, there's that wonderful phrase, not being able to see the wood for the trees. I think someone coming in from the outside and analyzing everything does give you that chance at clarity and removing the fog and seeing more clearly.
Well, I think that's a good point, Aaron, because I think working with a coach again, even though you're not, you know, necessarily bringing in that sort of external expertise to do the job, you're giving yourself the opportunity to have that almost third party perspective and just challenge the way you're thinking about things.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah.
So, in terms of final thoughts and maybe some takeaways for those watching, what advice would you give to someone who's stuck in a stagnant role right now? What would be the
Well,
first action, do you think?
bearing in mind we started this conversation talking about the European Central Bank and their sort of moving of people through and trying to create a little bit of momentum.
Hmm.
Kind of ironic at the end of the conversation
Yes,
talking about
absolutely. Back to
reinvention
square
and
one.
innovation. Keep your skills up to date. Think about where you're going to be going to. Where do you want to be 3 to 4 years time? And what's your longer term career strategy? And how can you keep yourself relevant? Don't just focus in on the present. Keep thinking about the future. Work with an executive coach to help you with that process if it's relevant. Understanding that what's the problem in the market and what's my point of difference? What can I do that really helps me stand out from the crowd will always help you in those conversations.
And going back to a company perspective, how do you feel companies themselves should reframe career success?
Yeah.
Because the definition's shifting by the day, isn't it? But how do you feel
Yeah,
companies should
so
perhaps?
again, I think the companies that are doing this well are looking at it from a perspective of employability rather than jobs for life, for sure. And they're helping and they're celebrating it when some of their best people move on. And they're equally celebrating it when those even better people come back in a while,
Yes,
having had, great experience elsewhere. So I think let's not be so precious about our staff. We all want to do the right thing to retain, but sometimes retention is not the right answer. It really isn't.
yes,
Sometimes it's fluidity in the talent market that
yes.
enables you to bring in the right talent at the right time.
And I think there is room for a better definition or a better blueprint for, as you say, talent fluidity. You know,
Yeah,
whether it's a case of promote from within, seek external staff, or as some of the pioneering Silicon Valley companies have done, encourage people. If it means they depart the company, maybe they
yeah,
will come back, and that's fantastic. But it's
absolutely.
more focused on the individual's career ladder
Yeah.
than the company's success. And speaking of career ladders, do we perhaps need to rethink the whole concept entirely? Is it a redundant phrase now?
Yeah, I think it is. I think absolutely it is. I mean, I guess it's it's how you want to look at it. Success for me, from a career perspective, is about achieving personal potential. It's not necessarily about a sequential move up a career ladder.
Yeah, and I think there's a huge likelihood that things will transfer into a portfolio type career where people are known for their
Very
personal
much.
brand or their personal signature, as opposed to going up the ladder in the traditional sense.
Very much. Yeah.
So exciting times, and we continue to navigate through them. But it's been a fantastic discussion, Robin, and I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your insights.
But no, delighted to talk to you, Aaron, as always. Really interesting discussion. And I think
Thank you.
probably more to come on this topic.
I think there will be for sure. And if anyone did find that particularly useful or has any further questions to follow up with, please don't hesitate to get in touch. All the contact details will be in the description box below. And if it has resonated in any way, please don't hesitate to subscribe to our channel, hit the like button, and we will look forward to seeing you next time. So thank you again, Robin. Great to
Take
see you.
care. Thanks.
All the best.
Bye.